Open a British wallet today, and a convicted criminal stares back at you. The £50 note, the most valuable banknote in everyday circulation in the United Kingdom. On one side, the king. On the other, a soft-eyed man with a side parting, printed above a ribbon of mathematics. His government gave him that honor in 2021. The same government, 70 years earlier, arrested him, dragged him through a courtroom, and sentenced him to be chemically castrated. His crime was not treason, not theft, not violence. His crime was falling in love. And here is what the judge who sentenced him was never allowed to know. The quiet man standing in the dock had shortened the Second World War by years and saved, by the estimates historians now use, something like 14 million human lives. This is the story of Alan Turing, the man who was arrested after saving Britain. Fair warning, every story on this channel has a wound in it somewhere. This one is the wound, but it is also, strangely, a story about how a mind can outlive the machine that crushed it. Stay to the end. The last minute changes the meaning of everything before it. Begin with a boy who seemed to be receiving signals from somewhere else. Alan Matheson Turing, born June 23, 1912, into a proper English family of empire and etiquette. A child who taught himself to read in about 3 weeks, and then aimed that reading at everything with a mechanism inside it. At boarding school in Sherborne, he is a catastrophe by the standards of the place. Ink-stained, shirt untucked, handwriting like a spider's escape route. His headmaster warns, in writing, that if the boy intends to be a scientist, he is wasting his time at a school built to produce gentlemen. When a general strike stops the trains on his first day of term, 14-year-old Alan gets on a bicycle and rides 60 miles, alone, overnight, to get to school. The gentleman never understood him. The bicycle tells you everything. Then, at 16, the signal finds a receiver. His name is Christopher Morcom, a year older, brilliant at mathematics and astronomy. The first human being who ever looked at strange, stammering Alan Turing and saw not an embarrassment, but an equal. They trade equations like other boys trade football scores. They chase comets through telescopes. For Alan, it is friendship, apprenticeship, and, as he would later make quietly clear, first love. In February of 1930, Christopher suddenly dies. Bovine tuberculosis hidden in his body for years. Alan is 17, and the grief does something unusual. It becomes a research question. He writes to Christopher's mother again and again, asking the question underneath all his mathematics. What exactly is a mind? Where did Christopher's go? Is thought something a body does, or something a body merely carries? Hold that question. It will build a computer, win a war, and haunt a courtroom. Cambridge gives the strange boy the one thing England had denied him: a habitat, King's College, tolerance, eccentricity, pure mathematics. Turing flourishes, and at 24, he produces a paper with a title only a logician could love. On computable numbers. Inside that paper, disguised as abstract logic, sits the 20th century. Turing imagines a machine, a simple device reading symbols off an endless tape, erasing, writing, moving, step by step. And he proves something staggering. One single machine, given the right instructions, could imitate any other machine, any calculation, any procedure a human mind could specify. One machine. That can become all machines. We have a name for that idea now. We call it a computer. You are watching this video on one descendant of that paper and carrying another in your pocket. He invented it on paper at 24, a decade before it was needed to save civilization, and it was about to be needed. Because across the North Sea, Germany had built a machine of its own. It sits in a wooden box and looks, almost comically, like a typewriter. It is called Enigma. Press a letter, and electricity snakes through a set of spinning rotors and a plug board. and a different letter lights up. Press the same letter again, and you get a different result. The scrambling changes with every single keystroke. The numbers are the nightmare. Standard military Enigma offers on the order of 159 quintillion possible settings. That is a 159 followed by 18 zeros, and every night at midnight. The Germans change the settings. Whatever you solved yesterday dies at 12 o'clock. Try a setting every second and the sun burns out before you finish. The Germans did the same arithmetic and concluded, reasonably, that Enigma was unbreakable. Their entire war, army orders, air raids, and above all the U-boat fleet, would speak through it with total confidence. That confidence is the crack. And here, the story owes a debt too many tellings forget. Poland got there first. Through the 1930s, 3 Polish mathematicians, Marian Rejewski chief among them, had quietly broken early Enigma using pure mathematics and even built machines to hunt its settings. But by 1939, the Germans kept adding complexity, and Poland was about to be devoured. So in July, weeks before the invasion, Polish intelligence summoned the British and French to a forest bunker near Warsaw and handed over everything: methods, replica machines, years of genius, gifted to allies who had assumed the problem impossible. It was one of the greatest acts of intellectual generosity in the history of war. Britain now had the keys to the old locks, but Germany was forging new ones faster than anyone could pick them. What Britain needed was not a solution. It was a factory for solutions. 50 miles northwest of London stands a gaudy Victorian mansion called Bletchley Park. On September 4th, 1939, the day after Britain declares war, Alan Turing reports there for duty. The place will grow into a secret city of nearly 10,000 people. Mathematicians, linguists, chess champions, crossword fanatics, and thousands of young women running the machinery around the clock. All of them sworn into a silence so total that husbands and wives working in neighboring huts did not know what the other did. Turing takes over the hardest problem on the property. Hut 8, Naval Enigma, the U-boat code. The staff call him Professor. They trade stories about him like folklore. The man who chains his tea mug to the radiator, who cycles in a gas mask when the pollen rises, who, fearing invasion, converts his savings into silver bars, buries them, and then loses the map. They laugh. They also notice something else. The strange man is building a machine to fight a machine. Turing's insight is a piece of judo. You cannot search 159 quintillion settings, so don't. Let the enemy shrink the problem for you. German operators are disciplined, and discipline is a pattern. Weather stations transmit at the same hours in the same format. Somewhere in that morning intercept, you can bet, sits the word wetter. Weather. Units sign off with predictable phrases. Some end messages with Heil Hitler. Cryptanalysts call these guessed fragments cribs, and Enigma has one strange, fatal vanity. It can never encrypt a letter as itself. Press A, and you will get anything except A. That tiny flaw lets you slide your guessed word along the gibberish and rule out every position where a letter would have to match itself. Turing designs a machine to industrialize this elimination. A bronze and cable colossus called the Bombe. Taller than a man, dozens of spinning drums imitating dozens of enigmas at once, chewing through the impossible, discarding millions of wrong settings until only candidates remain. The first bombs hum to life in 1940. Improved, multiplied, they become a farm of machines. Hundreds of them eventually, tended day and night. Midnight comes. The Germans change every setting, and the bombs simply begin again. Now understand why the naval code, Turing's code, was the one that could starve a nation to death. Britain is an island that cannot feed itself. Everything, food, oil, weapons, soldiers, crosses the Atlantic in slow convoys of merchant ships. Waiting for them are the U-boats, hunting in coordinated wolf packs, guided by radioed orders. In the black months, they are sinking hundreds of thousands of tons of shipping, month after month. Churchill would confess after the war that the only thing that ever truly frightened him was the U-boat peril. This is not a battle. It is a countdown. Every sunk tanker is a week of fuel. Every drowned freighter, a slice of the nation's bread. But every wolf pack runs on radio, and every radio message is Enigma. Break the code, and the invisible killers become dots on a map. Convoys swerve around them. Hunters become the hunted. By mid-1941, Hut 8 is reading the U-boat network, and the Atlantic graph begins, quietly, to bend. Then, February 1st, 1942. Silence. The German Navy adds a fourth rotor to its U-boat Enigmas. Overnight, the complexity multiplies 26-fold. And Bletchley goes blind. The new key earns a codename that sounds like what it is: Shark. For 10 months, the ocean goes dark. Sinkings soar toward the worst totals of the entire war. In November of '42 alone, losses surge past 700,000 tons. Rations shrink. Planners begin calculating, in private, how many months of supplies separate Britain from collapse. In Hut 8, men who have not properly slept in years stare at gibberish that will not confess. What breaks the blackout is not a theorem. It is two men, drowning on purpose. October 30th, 1942. Eastern Mediterranean. British warships depth charge the U-559 to the surface. Its crew abandons ship, leaving the sea valves open. 3 men from HMS Petard swim to the sinking submarine: Lieutenant Tony Fasson, able seaman Colin Grazier, and a 16-year-old canteen assistant, Tommy Brown, who had lied about his age to get to sea. Inside the flooding hull, by torchlight, they grab codebooks printed in ink designed to dissolve in water. The current weather and signal documents Bletchley is starving for, and pass them up through the hatch. Brown gets out. Fasson and Grazier are still inside, when the U-boat drops out from under them. 2 lives, traded for a few waterlogged pages. Weeks later, those pages let Hut 8 tear the throat out of Shark. In December 1942, the U-boat traffic lights up again, and stays broken, with interruptions, to the end of the war. Remember their names when this story reaches its courtroom: Fasson, Grazier, Brown. The code was broken by genius, and paid for in full. From here, the invisible victory compounds. Convoys thread between wolf packs they never see. Allied hunters appear over surfaced U-boats with impossible timing. By May of 1943, the German submarine force is losing boats faster than it can bear, and withdraws, beaten, from the North Atlantic. And the river of decrypted secrets, codenamed Ultra, floods every theater. It feeds the deception plans that convince Hitler the D-Day invasion will come at Calais, not Normandy. On June 6, 1944, Allied commanders know the enemy order of battle, in places better than the enemy does. After the war, Eisenhower would call the ultra-intelligence decisive to victory. Modern historians run the counterfactuals and land on a staggering range. Without Bletchley, the war lasts 2, perhaps 4 years longer. And since the war was consuming lives at a rate of millions per year, the arithmetic arrives at a number that should be impossible for one thread of effort, on the order of 14 million people, who got to live. Turing did not do it alone. Thousands served that machine of minds. But at its center, on its hardest lock, stood one man with a chained tea mug. And a question about where minds go. If stories like this are why you press play, subscribe now at the top of his triumph, because you already know what this channel knows. The higher the secret hero climbs, the further the institutions let him fall. 1945, the bonfires of victory light Britain, and 10,000 people at Bletchley Park pack their desks and vanish into ordinary life. The Official Secrets Act seals every mouth. The bombs are dismantled. The files disappear into vaults for 3 decades. The greatest intelligence triumph in the history of warfare. Officially, never happened. Turing receives a quiet decoration, an OBE, the kind of medal handed to competent civil servants. No one outside the vault can ever know why. He moves forward because his mind only has one gear. He designs one of the first true electronic computers on paper. In Manchester, he writes programming for one of the first machines that actually runs. In 1950, he publishes the question of his life dressed as a parlor game. Can a machine think? How would we know? We call it the Turing test. And the entire modern argument about artificial intelligence still lives inside that paper. He even turns to biology, using mathematics to explain how a leopard gets its spots. And here is a detail almost nobody knows. The body attached to that mind was itself extraordinary. Turing runs, not jogging. Running the way he thinks, alone and at full commitment. He takes up the marathon in his 30s and clocks a time of around 2 hours and 46 minutes. World class for his era. In 1948, he finishes near the front of trials associated with Britain's Olympic hopefuls. An injury, the only thing keeping the codebreaker from a serious shot at the games. Colleagues ask him why he punishes himself over such distances. His answer is pure Turing. He has a stressful job, he says, and running is the only way to get it out of his system. The mind that outran Enigma kept a body that could nearly outrun Olympians. Remember how complete this man was. When you watch what the state does next to that body, the war hero no one knows about is quietly inventing the future no one asked for. Then, in January 1952, a small burglary in Manchester ends the world. Turing's flat is broken into. Little of value is taken. He does what a law-abiding citizen does. He calls the police. He suspects the thief is connected to a young man named Arnold Murray, whom Turing has been seeing. And when detectives press for details, Turing, honest to the point of self-destruction and carrying the mild disdain of a man who has outthought empires, simply tells them the truth about the relationship. He even writes them a 5-page statement. Officers would later marvel that he seemed to see nothing wrong, apparently believing, as he told a friend, that the law was absurd and surely on its way to changing. The burglary is forgotten instantly, because in the Britain of 1952, what Alan Turing has just confessed to is a crime called gross indecency. The same statute from 1885 that destroyed Oscar Wilde, the victim of the break-in, becomes the accused. Now feel the full machinery of the irony, because it is the cruelest engineering in this story. In that courtroom in March 1952 stands a defendant who cannot say the one true sentence that would change everything. I shortened the war. The Official Secrets Act gags him. Bletchley does not exist. Ultra does not exist. The judge does not know. The jury does not know. The newspapers, printing his shame for the neighbors to read, do not know. The state prosecutes its greatest servant, with the servant forbidden to mention the service. The same secrecy that made him priceless now makes him defenseless. He pleads guilty on advice. His brother urges contrition. Witnesses describe Turing in court as composed, almost puzzled, a logician watching an algorithm execute on the wrong input. The court offers its mercy in the form of a choice: prison, or what the era calls organotherapy, hormone treatment. In plain language, chemical castration. Turing chooses the injections. For one reason: prison would take away his work. His mind is the only country that never exiled him, and he will not lose his citizenship. For a year, the state pumps synthetic estrogen into the body of the man who saved it. The effects arrive like slow vandalism. Impotence by design. That is the point of the punishment. His body softens and changes. He confides to friends, with bleak wit, that he is growing breasts. Some who knew him worried about the fog it laid over the famous mind. And the punishment does not stop at the skin. His security clearance is revoked. The consultant who once stood at the center of Britain's secrets is barred from government cryptography. Because this is the Cold War now. And Whitehall, following Washington, has decided that men like him are security risks. Blackmail bait, unreliable by nature. Think that through. The man proven most reliable in the nation's darkest hour. Reclassified as a risk, for the crime of being himself. Police watch him. A holiday abroad draws attention. The doors of his own life close one by one. Politely, in the English style. The surveillance is not paranoia on his part. It is policy. These are the years when Britain's establishment, spooked by defecting spies and prodded by American security doctrine, treats homosexuality itself as a category of national threat. So when Turing travels to Norway, to Greece, reports move through channels. When a young Norwegian acquaintance tries to visit him in England, the machinery quietly intervenes. The consultant who once read the enemy's most secret mail now has his own holidays read by his own government. He jokes about it in letters, in a tone friends recognize. The dry wit stretched a little thinner each time. He signs off one such letter with a line that historians still cannot read without flinching. Yours in distress, Alan. The man who endured the U-boat blackout without cracking is being worn down by peace. He keeps working. Morphogenesis. The mathematics of sunflowers. Letters to friends that flicker with the old dry humor. And one strange thread from his private mythology now steps forward. Because those who knew him would remember it forever afterward. Alan Turing loved the film Snow White. He had seen Disney's version years before and been captivated, especially by one scene. The witch lowering an apple into the poison. Friends recalled him chanting the couplet to himself, half joking. Dip the apple in the brew. Let the sleeping death seep through. A fairy tale about a poisoned apple, lodged in the mind of a man who thought in symbols his whole life. Keep that in view. It is about to become unbearable. Then, June 8th, 1954. His housekeeper lets herself in and finds him in bed. Dead. He is 41 years old. The cause is cyanide poisoning. On the bedside table sits an apple. Several bites taken. The inquest rules suicide. He had died the night before, June 7th. The apple is never tested. His mother insists to her own grave that it was an accident of his chemistry experiments. Decades later, some historians still argue the evidence was thinner than the verdict. Perhaps the uncertainty is real, and it changes nothing about what was done to him while he lived. The funeral is small. The secret holds. The country he saved reads a 3-line notice about an obscure mathematician, and turns the page. 14 million people were alive because of him. Not one of them knew his name. Churchill, who read the Ultra Decrypts daily and guarded them like scripture, is said to have described the Bletchley codebreakers as the geese that laid the golden eggs. And never cackled. He meant it as the highest praise. Perfect secrecy. Perfectly kept. But listen to the other side of that compliment. The geese could never cackle. Not to defend themselves in court, not to correct a newspaper, not to explain to their own families why they mattered. The silence that won the war was the same silence that let one of its greatest winners be destroyed in broad daylight, while a grateful nation looked on and saw only a stranger's scandal. Secrecy saved Britain. And then, it quietly helped bury the man who made the secrecy worth keeping. Truth in this story moves like a glacier, slow and unstoppable. In the 1970s, the ultra-secret finally cracks open. Books appear. The dead of Bletchley Park rise into history one by one. And at the center of the reconstruction, again and again, one name. The public learns, in the same decade, two facts it struggles to hold together. This is the man who broke Enigma, and this is what we did to him. The reckoning takes another generation. In 2009, after a national petition, the Prime Minister issues an official apology, naming the treatment of Turing appalling and saying, on behalf of the nation, "We're sorry. You deserve so much better." In 2013, the Queen signs a rare royal pardon, and then Britain does the only version of justice still available. In 2017, the law nicknamed the Turing Law extends pardons to the tens of thousands of men, some 49,000 of them already dead, convicted under the same statutes. One man's name becomes the key that unlocks 49,000 others. He would have appreciated the mechanism, and the rehabilitation keeps compounding. As if history is embarrassed and overcorrecting, Bletchley Park, once slated for demolition, is rescued and restored. Today, a museum where school groups walk through Hut 8 and stand where the Naval Code died. A slate statue of Turing sits there now, cross-legged, an Enigma machine in its lap. In 2012, his centenary is marked around the world. Lectures, monuments, his face projected onto buildings. The world's most prestigious award in computer science, the field's equivalent of a Nobel Prize, had already carried his name for decades. The Turing Award. Silicon Valley venerates him. Textbooks open with him. The digital civilization he sketched at 24, Daddy, has adopted him as its founding father. Every honor is deserved, and every honor arrives at an address where no one has lived since 1954. And so we arrive back where we began. In your wallet. In 2021, the Bank of England chooses the face for its new £50 note. Not a general, not a king. Alan Turing. His portrait, his signature. A table from the 1936 paper that dreamed the computer. And his birthday hidden in the ticker tape, in binary. The bank's governor announces it with a sentence that would have been unprintable in 1952, calling Turing a giant on whose shoulders so many now stand. The announcement is made, with no apparent blush, by the same state that once inked his name into a criminal register. The note enters circulation on June 23rd, his birthday. Somewhere in Britain today, that note is paying for groceries, handed across counters by people who will never be prosecuted for who they love, partly because of the man printed on it. Countries print on their money what they can no longer pay back. Turing left the world a famous question: can a machine think? But his life poses the darker mirror of it, because look at what destroyed him. The statute executed flawlessly. The court followed procedure. The clearance review applied its criteria. Every component of the state machine ran exactly as designed. And the output was the destruction of the one mind the machine could not afford to lose. Perfect logic. Zero thought. The real Turing test was never about whether machines could imitate humans. It is the one his own country failed in 1952. Whether institutions, those vast machines built of laws and desks and precedents, can recognize a human being when they are holding one. Enigma was broken in 4 years. That code, we are still working on. He never got to grow old, so the future he predicted grew old without him, and turned out to be his monument. Every phone, every algorithm, every artificial mind that stirs in a lab today runs downstream of a grieving 17-year-old asking where his friends' thoughts had gone. They took his honor, his body's peace, and finally his time. They could not take the tape, the endless tape of his one universal machine, still running, in everything. If this story moved you, do 2 things. Subscribe, because the archive of buried heroes is deeper than any of us were taught. And in the comments, answer one question honestly. If Turing's trial happened today, are you certain, truly certain, your own institutions would recognize the human in front of them? I will be reading. Until the next hidden hinge of history, look closer at the faces on your money. Some of them are apologies.